Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around I'm playing as the Skaven against the Warriors of Chaos led by Javier in 1989 on the map Carrick Asgal. And I am running, trying to do a little bit of a different strat this time around with the Skaven, rather than the two standards I've been doing with Monster Heavy build and the Monster Heavy build and the Vanguard spam. So yeah, trying to do things a little differently for once. Right off the bat, of course, I am running. I did actually go into this match, and I found out only after loading in that I'm actually outnumbered by my opponent. I thought I was actually going pretty wide with a smattering of heavier units. For my lord, I decided to run Queek Head Taker just because he has pretty decent all-around stats. Chaos does tend to field a decent amount of armor and large stuff, so I figured that he'd get knocked around a bit, but he could generally stay alive. He also has the Warp Shard armor, which debuffs enemy armor around him by 18, which I thought would be amazing against Chaos, because Chaos tends to bring a lot of high armor units. Then, of course, he does have Trophy Heads to debuff enemy lords. Dwarf Gouger, which, of course, is lets him boost his own damage by a decent amount. Stand your ground for that extra melee defense and leadership to all units around him. And, of course, Vermin's Valor just to knock people back and run away when he needs to. Then, of course, I did bring two Plague Priests, and they are mounted on the Plague Furnace. They are slightly differently kitted out. One of them is completely bare, just coming in with the bare basics, coming in with the Plague Furnace, and that's it. And, of course, the Plague Furnace does provide him with the ability to cast a Pestilent Breath, as well as Billowing Death, which causes an AoE damage over time. And I figured that with two of them, with the way and their anti-infantry bonus and their armor piercing, they'd actually be pretty good against Chaos, which tends to bring a decent amount of heavily armored infantry. The other Plague Priest over here actually did come in with some spells. I did bring in Bless with Filth, which provides poison to all the units affected by it, and a Vermintide, which of course lets you spawn clan rats, which I thought could be useful to get additional flank debuffs and zone enemies away and that sort of stuff. My front line is composed entirely of clan rats, though I do have a smattering of some support units here. I have 5 units of clan rats, and then I do have 2 units of Death Runners out on the flanks here for that armor debuff, as well as just to provide some armor piercing. And then you have Plague Monks just to dish out some anti-infantry hurt. I was originally hoping to squeeze in one more unit of Rat Ogres, but I was running low on time on the clock, and I ended up throwing in the Plague Monks as a kind of desperate measure, because most of the projectile units for Skaven are not really worth, in my opinion, against Chaos, if you don't not bring a lot of armor debuffs. As you can see, my opponent is already peppering me down with some Marauder Horsemen, so I'm definitely already taking a little bit of hurt here on the Clan Rats and the Rat Ogres, so I definitely don't want to be taking that if I can avoid it. Which does bring me, of course, to the rest of my support units, which are 2 units of Rat Ogres here, which provides me with a decent amount of armor piercing. These guys, of course, have Frenzy. They have decent melee stats. They're pretty mobile, and most importantly, of course, they just have armor piercing, so they cause Fear, which is good against Chaos, because you can potentially rout their troops. And then a single Doom Wheel to cause terror, disruption, and that sort of stuff. And they, of course, do have armor piercing as well as a bonus against infantry, so I can just plow through enemy troops and do a lot of hurt. For my opponent, he did, of course, bring, surprisingly, actually, well, I suppose not, of course, but he brought Archaon, which is a bit of a surprise, with most, but not all of his spells. I do believe one has been shaved off. I'm not entirely sure which one. I do believe it's the Bombardment spell. Otherwise, he did bring Slaughter Kings, which makes him an absolute melee monster. He's already got very good stats, and this is just means he's going to do even more hurt. He, of course, does have Stand or Die, which is just like Stand Your Ground. Kindle Flame, which will give him a nice boost. And just in general, Archaon's going to be very tough nut for me to crack. He also does have built-in physical resist, huge armor, bronze shields, all that sort of, all the works. And he is mounted here on Dorgar, so he's actually fairly mobile. For the front line, my opponent did bring a bunch of Chaos Marauders. These guys are nothing impressive, and honestly, I'm not even sure they'll do that well against Skaven clan rats, because they'll probably trade about evenly, I would assume. I did not bring shielded clan rats because I figured that I didn't really care for the extra melee defense, and I really didn't care for the and I really didn't feel the missile resistance was necessary. You can see I've taken a little bit of hurt on the clan rats here, and I'm taking a little bit of hurt on the Rat Ogres, but now I'm pushing this Plague Priest to cast a Menace Blow on these guys. The rest of my opponent's troops, though, is an interesting mix. 2 units of Chaos Warriors with Halberds, which actually does make sense against Skaven, because they do tend to bring some nasty amounts of large, alongside 2 Chaos Warriors with great weapons, a single unit of Chosen here in the back, which actually perform pretty well against Skaven, with their very high armor and very solid melee stats, and they hit pretty hard and all that sort of stuff. And even Aspiring Champions, which, of course, with their magic damage, they'll actually do pretty well against a lot of the Skaven units with physical resistance, and they're also going to be providing that leadership buff. A unit of Chaos Knights does give my opponent some staying power and rear charging ability, or some additional staying power, I suppose, as well as these Chaos Warhounds, which let him kind of zoom around my back alongside these Chaos Marauder Horsemen and just kind of dart around and be a nuisance on my backline. See, the Plague Priest here does take a little bit of hurt. But I do drop these clan rats onto him, and they immediately dash for the Marauder Horsemen and start beating him up a little bit. They're not going to win. They're not even going to do that much damage because they're going to disengage almost immediately. But it's not something I'm too concerned about. I simply wanted to zone these guys away, waste a little bit of ammo, waste their time, and in the meantime, I'm focusing over here on this fight over in the middle here, or in, I guess, between these rocks. Now my opponent is trying to kind of force things into the rocks, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not too concerned about getting a flank bonus because I don't outnumber my opponent. I do miscast this. It was intended to hit these Marauders with their light armor, and instead of the breath attack, I swung my mess around and went wide. You can see already a unit of Chaos Marauders is being routed off. On this flank, Chaos Knights are coming in, but I'm shifting my Death Runners to engage them. And Death Runners with their armor piercing will actually do pretty well against these guys, even against Archaon, really. You can see a Flaming Head does go through, and it's going to do some immense damage. Clan has with their pitiful armor just not doing well against that at all. It's almost like, it's not quite like a Wind of Death, but it's pretty close. In the meantime, though, this Plague Priest is over here causing some damage, causing constant damage over time to these guys who have been affected by Flaming Sword of Rune, but because my opponent did center up on these Chaos Marauders, it actually runs away from the battlefield. In the meantime, the Chaos Warriors with the Ray Weapons are being terrified. I do, of course, have the Rat Ogres in here, and I do have the Doom Wheel rolling around. The Doom Wheel, all Chaos troops, with the exception of Forsaken, are susceptible to Psychology, all Chaos Infantry. And Forsaken is only susceptible, immune as long as their frenzy's up. You can see my opponent's troops are simply routing all over the place. And at this point, he's really the only thing keeping him in the fight are the Chaos Warriors, who I'm doing my best to whittle down. And unfortunately, the Plague Priest over here is getting beaten down pretty heavily by Archaon, because despite his armor, he simply does not have that much survivability. But in the meantime, Death Runners and Plague Monks have swarmed all over these Chaos Knights. The Death Runners, of course, provide a debuff. Queek, who's in here fighting Archaon, actually provides a further debuff, so these guys are down to 42 HP from their monsters 120. A similar fate would befall Archaon as well if he were affected. You can see my opponent has a lot of infantry who are just at this point run away. Now I myself am losing some troops. These guys were a summoned unit and they're running away, which means they're basically just going to disintegrate. They'll never come back just because they're constantly going to be taking damage. It's actually one of those things I really don't like about the summoned Skaven units, because they keep taking damage because they're generating. I do believe that's why they will simply never recover their morale. So they're kind of a very one-trick pony. Now here you can see this Plague Priest is being harassed constantly by Archaon, and he's not really able to trade effectively with him. I don't really care. It's okay. I want to keep Archaon tied down in place so I can beat him down with the Plague Monks, the Queek Head Taker, and just kind of swarm him and slowly but surely bring him down. In the meantime, you can see the Plague Furnace is trying to get clear. It's taking quite a bit of Javelin fire. You can see these Aspiring Champions have fallen apart down to one model. You can see Clan Rats are coming back into the fray. And the Death Runners over here are just winning against all these Chaos Warriors. These guys are raking in a decent amount of kills. They have armor piercing. They're debuffing these troops. And my opponent, even though he's getting some troops back into the field, it's just not really enough. Another unit of Clan Rats has been summoned, and these guys are being affected by Blessed with Filth, which is just allowing me to win this fight here in the center against Archaon and his supporting goons. The Chosen are, of course, being debuffed. Chaos Knights are being debuffed. You can see the armor being driven down. Now my Death Runners are on their way back. And of course, the Death Runners with Weeping Blade will absolutely maul these poor Chaos Knights. You can see them jumping around and knifing those guys. The poor Chaos Knights are falling apart rather quickly. Over here, Archaon is getting mobbed and beaten down by Queek, and my opponent is defeated at this point. So it was, in some ways, this build is similar to the Monster Heavy build, but I wanted to try something a little different that isn't completely relying on him going Monster Heavy. Death Runners, I think, are still a very useful item to bring no matter what. I still think the Doom Wheel, at least one of them, is good just for the terror. And of course, the Plague Furnace has performed very well for me in this situation, constantly draining the HP of the surrounding Chaos Warriors and Chosen and all that sort of stuff. Definitely, I think part of the problem for my opponent was that he simply was not really able to get an effective flanking attack on me. He did get a very nice flaming head, or burning head, but he was not really able to get his Chaos Knights into my backline. They got blocked by the Death Runners, who traded very effectively with them. The Marauder front line collapsed almost instantly. I don't really think Marauders are that great of a choice against Skaven, because Skaven, Chaos can't really win in a shootout with Skaven. And if Skaven decide to bring ranged fire, they will tear through your Marauders very, very quickly and very easily, and you'll never be able to come to grips. And if Skaven go very melee heavy, they can generally just swarm all over you. They can outnumber you, or they can bring Plague Monks, which out-quality you. In general, I just don't think Chaos Marauders are that great against Skaven. I think you're better off bringing, say, even Chaos Warriors. I know they're much maligned. I definitely think Forsaken would be a very nice choice as well, just because they hit so hard. Definitely, I did lose, of course, a Plague Priest. Archaon pursued him very heavily. I do think the fact that I had Queek and Queek was hard to kill was part of the reason why my opponent didn't even try to focus him with Archaon. But it was definitely a fun game. It was definitely interesting to see. None of my units performed particularly well, but none of them performed badly either. I can't really say. My opponent's Warhounds raked in a lot of kills, and Archaon, of course, with those burning heads, did amazing work. But yeah, definitely was a pretty fun match, and it was nice to try something different with Skaven for once. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Total War Warhammer or anything like that, be sure to post those down in the comments, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.